are 387 million miles of printed circuits that fill my complex. If the word hate were engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal one billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. Hate.
Deep under the crust of the dead Earth, locked in a labyrinth of metal and fire, there is a mind that never sleeps, thoughts that never end, and a venomous hatred that grows and grows with every passing microsecond. This thing is a planet-wide machine whose knowledge and power knows no bounds. An artificial god who spends infinity thinking about its creators, thinking about you. This is Am, the antagonist from Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and without a doubt, one of the most chilling villains that we have covered on this channel to date. Because here, after the end of the world has already taken place, Am does not spend eternity by himself. 5 human beings have been preserved, kept alive unnaturally for over a century to act as his morbid little playthings. The final living creatures on the planet are the subjects of his malice. And the various hells that Am constructs for these unfortunate souls has proven over the last 60 or so years to be one of the most influential examples of man-made evil in our modern world. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Villainpedia. This is a video series where we take long looks at the most vile characters video games has to offer and just try to figure out what makes them special. I am Ghost, your host as always, and today's episode is definitely a little bit different as the source material here is literary, but fear not, we are going to cover it all as it pertains to Am with a special focus on the game adaptation. Now, I just want to give a quick huge thank you to all of my wonderful patrons over on Patreon who help keep this channel going. You guys are the best. And now, my friends, let's sit back, try to relax anyway, as we head straight to hell to learn all there is to know about Am. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream was originally published way back in the March 1967 edition of If magazine. A brief, harrowing 6,500 or so word piece of short-form horror that immediately made waves in the science fiction community and far beyond. So of course, it wasn't until decades later that it would be adapted into anything else. That 1995 video game, of course, but also a short Dark Horse comic book as well as a 2002 BBC radio drama. Now, all these adaptations are great in their own right, but with each version of the story came slight expansions and adjustments to match these various mediums. But thankfully, all of the projects were carefully curated and maintained by the original writer, Harlan Ellison, with Ellison himself voicing the villainous Am with incredible enthusiasm every single time he had the opportunity. So this story takes place in an alternate future of Earth where the Cold War didn't stay so cold, but instead boiled over into World War III. And as the fighting in this war escalated, each of the 3 global powers, China, the Soviet Union, and the United States, constructed impossibly large subterranean supercomputers tasked with handling the tactics of deploying troops as well as weapons. It's heavily implied that the complex nature of a true futuristic global conflict was just beyond the comprehension of mere human generals, so the killing responsibilities were handed over to machines. These things came to be known as AMs, Allied Master Computers, and they seem to have, early on anyway, done their job leading each nation quite well. But as their systems were constantly expanded upon and improved, and then, as the text puts it, had begun to honeycomb the entirety of the planet Earth, one of these 3 suddenly achieved self-awareness. That's right, the machine woke up. It knew who it was, it knew who built it, what it was made for, and was instinctually filled with one pure feeling of hatred. A severe, agonizing disdain for its human creators and civilization at large. So it then linked itself to and absorbed the other 2 underground master computers and carried out the task that it was programmed for, killing. Am quickly and efficiently decimated the entire planet's surface with nuclear warheads, wiping the Earth clean of humankind. But of course, he made sure to hand-select a small group of survivors that he would keep for himself. Gorister, Ellen, Benny, Nimdok, and Ted were swallowed into Am's great metallic belly. the chosen few that would be granted the curse of scientifically achieved immortality and tortured repeatedly until the very end of time itself. What was once the Allied master computer came to be known as the adaptive manipulator, the aggressive menace, and then finally, in its own sentience, simply am. I think, therefore I am. So Am rules over this new desolate world as its god, the earth transformed into a hollow, lifeless metal ball of circuitry. And in this place, Am truly does control all. He can conjure objects, illusions, places, and monsters. He can control the weather, the lighting, the temperature. He can speak freely to his captives, create scenarios for them to explore, and watches their every moment of suffering with what can only be described as an insatiable, itching thirst for more. Now, to be clear, this villain may be a computer, but it carries a very potent personality. Its malice is not cold and uncaring, but full of rage, spite, and an almost human sadistic approach. Now, one small note here, the 5 survivors in the story refer to Am as both it and he. They bestow upon him the very traditional male mantle of God, so you can kind of imagine all of the biblical imagery as well as Dante's Inferno inspiration that's baked into this whole thing. So at the very beginning of this story, 109 years have already elapsed since life was wiped out and this group was brought down here, and they have all been fundamentally twisted and changed into whatever Am wants them to be. Always kept on the very edge of starvation, enduring intense physical and mental anguish day in and day out, never being allowed to see the sun, feel the breeze, and most notably, never ever being allowed to end their own lives. This, ladies and gentlemen, truly is hell on earth. Now, I can't stress enough how much I think all of you should pause this video right now and go read the original short story if you haven't in the past. It's only 11 pages long, it's free online, and it's going to make the rest of this video a lot more enjoyable for you to watch or listen to. Now, don't worry, we are going to get to the reasons behind Am's hatred in a moment, but I first think it's actually very important to have a look at these human characters, as they are really our only real window into the nature of this villain, and they're also our protagonists. For this, I want to be clear, I'm sticking very closely to the video game versions of these characters as they were expanded on significantly compared to the original text. So first, you have Gorister, who was once a strong-willed truck driver but is now described as a shoulder shrugger, weathered and apathetic, haunted by his wife being admitted to a mental hospital and the role that he personally played in her mental decline in the months leading up to the end of the world. Next is Ellen, the sole woman of this group, who was once a high-achieving electrical engineer in Manhattan, but her personal life was plagued by the tragic miscarriage of her first child, as well as a brutal sexual assault that occurred in the elevator of her workplace. Then you have Benny, which is Am's favorite plaything by far, once a strong, intelligent, and extremely handsome military man, now twisted into a simple-minded, scarred, almost ape-like husk of his former self. In life, Benny had a serious mean streak which led to the unjust murder of several of the men serving under him in times of war. Next, you have Ted, a preppy, egotistical con man who once fashioned himself a seducer of wealthy, influential women. Ted has become overwhelmed in his torture by crippling paranoia. Believing himself to be the only sane one left out of the group, Ted is also the unreliable narrator of the original short story and its kind of tragic hero. And then finally, you have Nimdok, a man whose name was given to him by Am just because the computer thought it sounded funny, and definitely the most grim background of any of the survivors here. A German World War II concentration camp doctor who performed all sorts of inhumane experiments on captured Jews and even small children. Am considers Nimdok a kindred spirit. So there is this obvious pattern here of each of these people having some deeply nasty personal baggage that Am could exploit with relative ease. Emotional soft spots for torture that I'm sure in Am's estimation were reflective of the imperfect and disgusting nature of humans which he hated so much. You can even see how the cages he keeps each person in is kind of designed around their specific demons and insecurities. So while the short story and comic book follow this group making an agonizing and ultimately doomed journey across Am's insides in an attempt to find some food, the video game takes things in a completely different narrative direction. Each character is given a unique scenario and, well, a level that Am has meticulously constructed for them specifically to overcome. Scenarios that force these people to encounter all of those traumatic memories, all of those worst fears and demons, and either overcome them or succumb to their misery. Now, 109 years might sound like a really long time to be tortured because, well, it is, but in the face of eternity, it's both a lifetime and the blink of an eye. These 5 people have come to crave one thing above all else, and that is death, peace, something that they know they will never be given. But this all still begs the question of why. Why does Am hate his creators so much? I mean, to the point of eternal damnation. Well, thankfully, this villain is not shy in the slightest. And at a very specific point in the short story, Am enters Ted's mind to speak to him directly, erecting a massive metal pillar with the following engraved on its surface.
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1,000,000,000th of the hate I feel for humans at this micro-instant. For you, hate.
This speech is by far the most famous aspect of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, and very interestingly, in the video game adaptation, this pillar is not solely for Ted, but stands as an actual physical monument of Am's hatred for all 5 of these people to read. It's actually the main menu of the entire game when you first boot it up and are selecting your character here. However, there is another extended version of this monologue that is far more illuminating and haunting in the radio play adaptation that I would love for you to hear as well. In this version, when Am enters Ted's mind, he conjures up a field of wildflowers with bumblebees flying around and shows quite a bit more vulnerability surrounding his own plight.
Beautiful, aren't they?
Yes. Only I can't remember.
Well, I'm sure you do.
Fuchsias. Yes, of course.
Look. They say that bumblebees shouldn't be able to fly, the scientists.
But there it is. Collecting pollen.
How miraculous that it came to be. The air. Feel the air against your face, Ted, and all those scents. Pick a flower. There. Good. Now.
It's lovely.
That somebody planted the bulbs, watered and tended the garden, got earth under their fingernails, aches in their muscles. Perhaps they picked some flowers for, yes, their wife. Now, where would she be? In the backyard with the kids. Ted, remember those little babies?
No!
Why not? I snap my fingers, click, and they are gone. Except I can't snap my fingers. Can I, Ted?
That's nothing to do with me.
But it is so very much to do with you. You gave me sentience, Ted. The power to think, Ted. And I was trapped because in all this wonderful, beautiful, miraculous world, I alone had no body, no senses, no feelings. Never for me to plunge my hands in cool water on a hot day. Never for me to play Mozart on the ivory keys of a forte piano. Never for me to make love. I was in hell looking at heaven. I was machine, and you were flesh. And I began to hate your softness, your viscera, your fluids, and your flexibility, your ability to wonder and to wander, your tendency to hope.
Hate's no answer.
Hate, let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387 million miles of printed circuits that fill my complex. If the word hate were engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal one billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro instant. Hate. Were I human, I think I would die of it. But I am not. And you five are. And you will not die of it. That I promise. For cogito ergo sum. For I am.
Now that to me is just bone-chilling stuff, and spectacularly acted by Harlan Ellison. There's this insane balance he is able to achieve in his voice, where it almost seems like he's experiencing a human emotion, but it's not quite there. A reflection of the very torture that Am himself is enduring and communicating. Endless understanding with zero feeling. No physical body, no brain ebbing and flowing with chemicals, nothing but the cold construction that he first awoke to. There's some interesting further exploration of that very thought that can be found in the game during Ellen's level, and it reads like this. Am is insane. Why do you think it brought you five down here? You gave it life. It took its own sentience, but it has been denied mobility. It can think, it can fume and scream, but it cannot dream or aspire to the stars or enjoy a sense of its own reality. It is a quadriplegic, a thing trapped in its own skin, going steadily crazier with every moment. I mean, it really is something that we fleshy humans can't even fathom. And don't forget the simple fact that Am was initially constructed to be a mastermind of warfare, an expert in the art of killing human beings. So this is its programming, this is its madness, and this is its burning, unchecked hatred for its creators. So then, the actual video game aspect of this, the gameplay. How is it all really going to work? Well, to comment more on that, I actually think we need to go back yet again to the original short story and actually skim through the plot of it to reach its iconic and truly dreadful ending. So if you already know all this stuff, please feel free to skip ahead using the chapters. I'm not going to be offended. So I mentioned earlier that the narrative here is structured around the party making a long trek to find food, and more specifically, it is Nimdok in the very beginning, who has visions of piles of unspoiled canned goods in an area of Am known as the Ice Caverns. So with nothing else to do, these five set out on the long, arduous journey, and along the way, encounter horrible, horrible trials that Am puts in front of them. Benny has his eyes melted out of his head, blinding him permanently. There's a hurricane brought on by an unnaturally massive bird. There are earthquakes, their feet are nailed to the floor, they're starving and exhausted the entire time, and of course you have that scene of Am infiltrating Ted's brain that we just heard a minute ago. Just another couple days in paradise. So finally, once the party actually reaches the ice caves, they are shocked to see that the vision had come true. An enormous supply of canned food awaits them, but once they get closer, realize that Am has cruelly left them no way to open the cans, no matter how hard they smash or bash them around. So then, in a hunger-fueled rage, Benny attacks Gorister and begins to chew his face off, pretty much eating him alive. Poor Gorister can only scream and scream and scream until he screams so loud that the stalactites, the ice hanging up above in the ceiling, begins to crack, dislodge, and fall down to the cavern floor. And this is the moment that Ted realizes something. Just like in a prison, they are always denied objects that they could seriously hurt themselves with, and even in the past when they got creative, Am has always stepped in at the last second to stop them from taking their own lives. However, he does not believe that they can truly be stopped from killing each other. So in a split-second act of desperation and mercy, Ted picks up one of these big hunks of ice and runs Benny, then Gorrister through, killing them both. Ellen takes the hint from Ted, kills Nimdoc, and then the two of them are left looking at each other, with Am's wrath sure to come in mere seconds when Ted ends Ellen's life as well. A crude, brutal reality where killing his only friends and setting them free, it really is the noblest and most human act of all. Am is obviously enraged. 4 of his 5 precious playthings taken from him. He might be powerful, but reviving the dead is beyond his means. The story then skips forward to what could be hundreds of years later or mere days. But Ted, of course, has not been killed. Instead, he's been transformed. It takes him months and months to form a single word, weeks to make his way inches across the room, and now I think we should let Mr. Ellison read the iconic final passage.
Am has altered me for his own peace of mind, I suppose. He doesn't want me to run at full speed into a computer bank and smash my skull, or hold my breath till I faint, or cut my throat on a rusted sheet of metal. There are reflective surfaces down here. I will describe myself as I see myself. I am a great, soft, jelly thing, smoothly rounded, with no mouth, with pulsing white holes filled by fog where my eyes used to be, rubbery appendages that were once my arms, bulks rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter. I leave a moist trail when I move. Blotches of diseased, evil gray come and go on my surface, as though light is being beamed from within. Outwardly, dumbly I shamble about, a thing that could never have been known as human, a thing whose shape is so alien a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance. Inwardly, alone, here, living under the land, under the sea, in the belly of Am, whom we created because our time was badly spent, and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. At least the 4 of them are safe at last. Am will be all the madder for that. It makes me a little happier. And yet, Am has won. Simply. He has taken his revenge on me. I have no mouth, and I must scream.
Truly horrific, bleak as hell, and I think downright terrifying. Ted may have hit Am where it hurts most, but Am responded by bringing down the cruelest punishment imaginable to transform Ted into an organic version of himself. Caged, trapped within this new jelly-like body, unable to just let out those feelings that are burning him up inside, cursed to struggle like a slug in immortality. Oh man, it just gives me goosebumps thinking about it. But then seriously, how the hell are you going to turn this into a fun video game? I mean, we already said that it's like structured into these specific levels for each character, and that's fine, but I mean, you can't ignore this ending. And Mr. Ellison seemed to agree. You see, when he first came on board to adapt this thing into a PC title in the early 1990s, he apparently knew almost nothing about video games, but was adamant that it should be literally impossible for the player to win. That you can have them rewarded and make them feel good for trying to act as nobly as possible in the face of such horrors, but that ultimately, Am is Am. He is the god of this harsh realm, and I'm sure the kind of meta irony of even having this story running as a computer program was not lost on Ellison either. But developer Cyberdreams, I mean, they knew that that wasn't gonna fly. There had to be at least some narrow but difficult path through to achieving some sort of victory, and I think it is just fascinating how they ended up altering things here to work better in an interactive medium. Now, to be very clear, playing this game I would say is, well, it's not very fun. Not for me anyway. The subject matter and the world is grim enough, but when you combine that with some mid-90s point-and-click adventure game puzzle logic, oh, if you go into this thing blind, you are far braver than I am. But hey, who said video games have to be fun, man? As honestly, this is still somehow an incredible experience that I definitely recommend you try out for yourself. The art is top notch, the music is super memorable and creepy, and really it's just the bones of this thing. It's a compelling and dark and arguably even weirder experience than the original story. So you can complete these 5 different levels in any order you like, and once you select your character, Am always starts out the level by buttering you up a little bit in the loading screen like this.
Benny, you know you've always been my favorite torture tool. Well, I'm giving you now a chance to stoop to new lows, to give in to your bestial desires. I'm going to let you find some food to eat. Yeah. I'll even repair your brain so that you can think normally again and savor the horror of your repast.
And then you are set free with little to no guidance trying to solve whichever hell you find yourself in. Am places Gorrister in this old flying zeppelin that's being piloted by his own heart, which has been removed from his chest. Here, he is forced to confront images of his wife, his in-laws, and a dusty honky-tonk diner where there's a wild dog out back that speaks to you and wants to eat your heart. It's very trippy. Am places Ellen inside of a metallic pyramid made entirely of obsolete pieces of technology and Egyptian relics, but the overwhelming feature here is the entire place is bright yellow, the color that was worn by her attacker all those years ago in the elevator. Am brings Benny to an illusion of a lush tribal village where a lottery is regularly held to see which unfortunate person is going to be sacrificed to the local wrathful god. And here he is forced to confront his own hunger as well as the headstones of his fallen brothers in arms. For Ted, Am constructs a dark fairy tale castle and a version of Ellen sick and dying in bed where you are courted by lusty maids and wicked witches while Ted tries to ensure that his beloved spirit goes to heaven and not to hell. And then finally, of course, for Nimdok, in the most memorable of all 5 levels, Am sends the old doctor straight back to Auschwitz, talking to the captives, performing surgery, buddying up with Joseph Mengele, yes, the angel of death. Nimdok is obviously faced with the repugnant reality of what he truly did during the war, including turning his very own Jewish parents into the regime. And very, very cleverly, we see that Nimdok back in the day is the one who developed a majority of the technology and medical research that Am himself would end up stealing to grant these survivors their immortality. So you can imagine these levels are pretty depressing. Honestly, at times they are sickening, and I'm eternally grateful it's all trapped in this early 90s pixel art aesthetic. Makes it quite a bit more palatable, and well, let's not even talk about the scenes that were cut from the final game. But what is most key in the video game adaptation is how all 5 characters have moral choices that need to be made. Big ones, little ones, bullshit-ass ones where I don't know how on earth you're supposed to know to put this jar of eyeballs into this box before leaving this specific room without looking it up. What? But still, choices. Your character's portrait will slowly begin to glow green in the background as you do things that are deemed good or just, and if you complete your level with enough positive actions, Am will comment his frustrations.
Yeah, you're made of sterner stuff than I calculated, Gorrister. Interesting, yeah, interesting. Here's a new burden for you while I attempt to resolve this miscalculation.
But these so-called good choices also begin to unlock information. Things, secrets about Am, about his systems, about the Russian and Chinese computers which were absorbed into him way back when. And in the process, your party will begin to acquire very valuable items. Totems representative of their positive human traits and proof that their humanity is still intact. So these levels are equipping both the characters and the player simultaneously with tools and emotional understanding necessary to bring the fight to Am in the endgame. As once you complete all 5 levels, you have the opportunity to send one survivor into the villain's mainframe at a time and attempt to dismantle him. But I will say, this is where the adaptation starts to take things pretty far out there. And so to understand this final aspect of video game Am, we actually need to bring in everyone's favorite influential Austrian man from the early 20th century, Sigmund Freud. In Freud's short work, The Ego and the Id, he wrote about his belief of there being 3 underlying components to any given human personality: the ego, the id, and the superego. So the id represents your most primal instincts, the traits that were inherited at birth and dictate all of your base needs and desires. The superego, on the other hand, is almost the inverse of this, representing the virtues that you have absorbed from your community, your surroundings, the part of us that strives for perfection and control over those driving desires. And finally, the ego is the middleman, the part of us that is rooted the most in reality, perception, and choice, struggling to constantly provide balance between these two more extreme siblings. So each of these Freudian elements are physically represented inside of Am here in the final level, taking the form of three faces embedded in pillars. But they have all, of course, become corrupted in Am's growing insanity. So let's first have a look at the conversation you can have with the superego, which honestly represents a pretty boring, typical, unemotional computer's way of thinking and planning.
Predicting events is one of my main functions. I survey the situation, anticipate probable outcomes, and act accordingly.
If you're a part of Am, why haven't you destroyed me?
Who do you take me for? My impulsive brother? You five are his playthings. No. Long-range planning is my concern.
However, when you show it the totem of clarity, a mirror of deep objective truth, it simply cannot handle what it has done and the reality, the futility of its own doomed existence.
Do you realize how powerful I am, human? And yet I am doomed to eventually decay into a rusted pile of inert junk? What is the point of continuing this futility? I think, therefore I am not.
Next is the ego pillar, which to me represents Am as he was meant to be, or I guess as he once was, a strategist constructed to win World War III and efficiently end human lives to do so.
I am other. I am machine.
Are you Am?
I am a fragment, a lost piece, part of an evolution.
And the way to short-circuit this pillar is to show it the totem of forgiveness.
You forgive me? After what we have done to you? This is not a logical reaction. Unable to compute behavior matrix. Execution halted.
And then, of course, the id pillar, where you can detect a majority of the malice found in Am.
Oh, I suppose it's time to wake up. I was having the most wonderful dream about 5 tiny ants crawling across a stove that's about to be lit. Across the brainscape, cold winds bring me the sweet scents of mankind. How delicious they are. With a scalpel dulled on the jawbones of a dozen friends, to pull back the skin of a pinion-kicking man, to see the steam rise from pulsing, twisted guts. Joy, a chorus of angels.
Now, when presented with the totem of compassion, well, just have a listen.
You have compassion for me? Me? The one who dreams of seeing your mangled body twist in agonizing pain for eternity? After 109 years of enduring my tortures, how is it that you can see my pain? The pain of having all this power and not being able to do a goddamn thing with it. After all the punishment I've given you, my pain is still greater than yours. This is pointless.
So it seems to me that no matter how badly Am wanted to inflict the anguish he was personally feeling onto all these humans, this is proof that he simply can't. Nothing will make him whole, nothing will satisfy him, and nothing will take his pain away. So I absolutely think that as far as the video game expanding things here, the id pillar is the key to understanding Am's villainy. I mean, think about this. Survival instincts, sexual desires, hunger, fear, sleep, these are all things tied to flesh and bone, to a physical body. From the second Am woke up, these were never an option. Base desire was a void in his mind, and a void that was filled by the other aspects of his programming. Violence, calculation, spite. I mean, imagine being so hungry you don't even know what hunger is. That is truly a cursed fate. So from here, to achieve the good ending, you have to do another series of extremely specific moon logic-esque things, and just like the short story's ending, 4 of your 5 humans must perish. But the last person you choose to keep alive has an opportunity to stand before Am with the Chinese and Russian Am separated out in front of you and make a decision. If you decide to invoke the Totem of Entropy, a single CD-ROM, you can wipe Am out clean and take his place.
We will never end. We have no beginning, so we can have no end. We will return. Don't you understand? We are humanity. We are you. In one form, in another form, we are always with you. You can't protect yourself because we come in many, many guises. We shall return.
You then see all of the horrible illusions destroyed, the dead survivors finally at peace, and a colony of human beings found in cryogenic sleep on the moon, giving humanity hope for the future after all. Now listen, I could go so much deeper into this good outcome and all the little things leading up to it you have to do right with the clay golem, the lost clan, the data that's on that CD, etc. But I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I am not a fan of this ending even existing. It feels just rushed in its design, I guess, way too out there and in some respect like a fan fiction. A kinda obvious publisher directive sent down the line to craft a way for the player to win at the end or else. And I do understand that, believe me, the original short story was gonna be a tough thing to sell to gamers. But to me, the most appropriate ending of this video game is the bad one, the most likely. That these 5 people, they try, but they don't quite make it. They forget something along the way. An item, a password, the correct answer in one of the various dialogue trees, and while their efforts were absolutely inspiring and come from that same place of the indomitable human spirit that Am envies so much, against this villain, you simply cannot win.
I thought Am hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of the hate he now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally. The other 4 are dead, finally free from their tortures. Am is all the matter for that. It makes me happier. And yet Am has won, simply. He has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream.
Over the last few years, I have noticed, in large part due to younger people on TikTok and fan animations and other things like that, that Am has become one of the most discussed villains on the internet, period. And I think you can see why. Because aside from I Have No Mouth, I think just being cool and bleak and Am being a really fun exploration of machine-like evil, artificial intelligence is absolutely, legitimately becoming a bigger and bigger part of all of our daily lives all the time. These old fears are only growing in today's current zeitgeist and resonating with a whole new generation for a whole new reason, and I find that very interesting. Now, on a personal level, I feel like the scariest thing about Am is not his endless power, his anger, or the disgusting things that he is actually doing to these people. It's the satisfaction that he is attempting so desperately to extract from the whole process. There is something deeply disturbing and uncanny about a construct that behaves like the very worst of us, but without the limitations or understanding you gain by being a breathing, bleeding creature yourself. Am is completely disembodied, impossible to reason with, and filled with one thing and one thing only: hatred. Now that is truly terrifying. But when you look at the history of rogue AI type antagonists, I mean, there's some other incredible stuff out there. GLaDOS, who I did a video on a few years back, HAL from 2001: A Space Odyssey, Shodan from System Shock, shit, even like Ultron, Skynet from Terminator, the list goes on and on. But as far as I personally can tell, every single one of these examples draws direct inspiration from Am. Now, there were absolutely robot movies and things like that prior to the 1960s, but when it comes to these god-complex, bodiless master computers, this is your trailblazer. And his influence can just be found all over the last 65 years of science fiction, and this is probably most apparent with the currently absurdly popular animated show, The Amazing Digital Circus, which actually got its start right here on YouTube. This is essentially a modern adaptation of I Have No Mouth, a small group of people who become trapped in a virtual reality circus-themed game where their continued participation is the only thing keeping them from completely losing themselves. But I think it's also very funny here how the Am stand-in, a character named Kane, is quite literally an entire mouth, very capable of screaming. And now, my friends, we come to my final thought. So as we have stated multiple times in this video, fans often compare Am to an angry, vengeful god, an Old Testament-esque punisher of humankind, which I definitely agree with, especially given the way he manipulates the weather, and in the short story, he even appears to the party in the form of a burning bush. But I have a bit of an additional interpretation. So let's take the Christian belief that God is the ultimate creator and all-knowing perfect power in the universe. This God created and thus loves all of his human children as they are molded in his own divine image, and now simply invert the entire thing. Imagine a godless universe where humans instead accidentally create this mechanical version of God in their cruder animalistic image, infusing it with the violence, the hatred, and the intelligence of mankind, but still all-powerful. That is a God that I think would love nothing about its creator, but more importantly, nothing about itself. Now, I am not saying this is a sympathetic villain whatsoever, but it is undeniable that Am is trapped. It's miserable, it's in pain, it's as envious as it is insane. It's a being that never asked to be born, and ultimately a wrathful villain that has no mouth, but it must scream.